Northwood House, a house like no other, a house shifting through time, a secretive house situated in the picturesque surroundings of Cowes on the beautiful Isle of Wight.
A place that embraced the cultures of Rome, Greece and ancient Egypt, but also a place of silent contemplation.
A secret hideout for the desperate, a site of sadness and misery. As this house has turned through time, memories of the past still cling to this very strange place. Stories and sights fill the ballrooms and empty offices from 400 years of tales and legends. Today their ghosts remain, pacing hallways, protecting rooms, and always making their presence felt.
We are going to peel back the layers of brick and plaster to show both history and myth. See these tales and the people who lived and also died within these walls. And perhaps dig down even deeper to find the mystical energies that course through this country house, making it the character-filled and opulent large country retreat that we see today.
This is Northwood House Uncovered. The ballroom has had many uses over its life. The ladies' room for gentlewomen to recline after dinner. A dance space, which in the 1840s, with the popularisation of extravagant balls, was adapted to be able to hold an orchestra for the various guests to waltz the night away. It has even been a chapel and a hospital ward. You really get a sense of the opulence of the room just looking around it. For instance, these frescoes on the ceiling are painted by artists all the way from Genoa in Italy. You can almost hear the champagnes flowing, the band playing, people dancing. But behind all this glamour and glitz, there is a very strange air of mystery in this room.
Visitors to the ballroom have also experienced odd things. Their phone and laptop batteries have drained. Radios have given strange whistling noises, and they've even come into contact with a lady called Sue via a medium, who gave her date of passing as 1826. In 1851, at the Great Exhibition, the Ward family purchased this beautiful Egyptian masterpiece. They were trying to cash in on the Victorian love of Egyptology. Can you imagine the beautiful parties that they used to have with the servants all dressed up in Egyptian costume? Visitors to the house are known to be welcomed by Tom, the resident caretaker, a presence that walks up and down the ground floor. Often, during the late evenings, he can be felt locking doors and occasionally giving a reassuring jangle of the keys to let the staff today know that being dead is no excuse for turning up to work late.
While Tom patrols the ground floor, other residents of the house include the matron. A reminder not only of the First World War, but the often overlooked but no less tragic Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, one of only 2 pandemics in all of human history, which, given when the other one is the Black Death, gives a real sense of how awful this tragedy was, especially just following the Great War of 1914 and 18, where 500 million people worldwide were infected. Over 250,000 people in Britain alone died.
Opened as a Red Cross voluntary detachment hospital in 1914, the sisters tended to the dying and the sick as best they could. Gas attacks, gangrene, dysentery and shell shock, all were seen within these walls. The matron can be seen pacing the stairs and the drawing room, no doubt awaiting good news on her charges. Sensors placed around the house have detected her comings and goings, and she has been known to trip alarms walking from the dining room to the ballroom, long after the house is locked for the night. A nurse's work is clearly never done. However well cared for the soldiers were here, however, there are stories of the sick and injured. This bathroom was built to decontaminate soldiers with mustard gas. There is allegedly the story of a soldier who drowned in the bath here.
Northwood House in World War II installed an operating theatre into the building to operate on wounded servicemen and to heal those injured in air raids. Just to the left of me is where the room was built. There's a real macabre feel to this room, a real sense of patients being rushed in and being operated on to try and save their lives.
That here at Northwood we get unexplained temperature drops. I've seen it, we've recorded it. The temperature can crash 5.5 degrees in 10 seconds and then come back up slowly. Now, is that associated with the fact that the alarm system in the same room keeps tripping? Is it associated with what our friends, the mediums, have sensed in that room, or that other people have done with Ouija boards, which I'm not a great fan of, but are they all completely different effects? Is the fact that people have seen shapes in the room, that things disappear and things appear? These are all established and known paranormal phenomena. And I use that word you don't use it lightly, it's a phenomena. I don't know whether they're associated, but here at Northwood House, we've seen them, we've experienced them, and they've been experienced by people who had no idea that's what Northwood House had.
So keep going on that. And once brought from upstairs, they were then taken here into the cellars. Once a place for holding food and drink for the waiting gentry, now a place where bloody remains of men fought for their lives. But like so many other parts of this house, it's had many other uses as well. In World War II, it sheltered cows from the Blitz. The Ministry of Defence in the Cold War recognised this place as the only safe place on the island, also in the event of a nuclear attack. Further and further back in time we go, and we start to see evidence of the island's smuggling history. At one point during the 18th century, 60% of all island residents were involved in it. And it's around this sort of area that we may meet Henry the pirate.
Time it's a feeling. You get a feeling when you're not alone, and obviously I'd be down in the cellar by myself in the dark a lot, and there's particular points in the cellar, like the wine cellar area. That's not a welcoming area. The spirit that's there does not like you to be there because he's busy and he wants you out of the way. And it always makes you feel like it's an oppressive feeling there, like you need to get away. But he didn't bother you in any other way. Henry was always around. We'd always say hello Henry when we went down there because it's respectful. It's his home and we're coming into his home, so you have to show some respect. And he was always pleasant. He'd give you a nice feeling, and it was warmer when Henry was around, considering how cold it is down there. Whenever Henry was around, it was warmer, and he'd like to follow the tour. If you turn around, you can sometimes see the orbs. But there's also a little boy. He used to come down into the cellar, and he'd show himself by blue and red lights, and they're at child height. And he would follow around for a little while, and then he'd disappear back up to the top corridor, where he used to spend a lot of time with Alice. She takes care of him.
Henry?
Yes, Henry's a good example. I worked here for 5 years as an actor, and one of the characters I reenacted was Henry. So a lot of the time you wouldn't necessarily see him, but you'd feel the fact that he's there with you. The room that I used to use down in the cellar, it was always the same room every time. And sometimes you walk into the room and feel, oh, okay, yeah, he was waiting for me. Because the same time every week, throughout the tourist season. So it was quite a routine to do that. And it felt like he seemed to enjoy being remembered, because we were obviously saying that his name, he's Henry, I'm reenacting Henry, so he's getting the recognition for who he was. And depending on the audience that we had, I'd make the tour more fun. If there's a lot of kids, I'd make it a bit more bubbly, a bit more, a little bit more dramatic and theatrical. But he seemed to like that. He'd kind of get involved with it a little bit sometimes. People at the back of the room, they'll be looking behind them like, what was that? Which is always great for me, because it actually gets people feeling and thinking, which is always great for me doing that job.
The staff call this reprobate Henry the smuggler. He's seen often wandering around moving barrels. Now this is his area, so that's why I'm going to keep my voice down. But he is quite the conscientious smuggler, as staff have often found. Old-fashioned coins lying on the ground. Other sightings include Edward, a small child that died of tuberculosis somewhere, we believe, in the 18th century, and an unnamed couple peering out of the dark. Even being down in these cellars, you do really get a sense every time you turn around a corner that someone or something is staring right back at you. Work come across them and things like that.
Well, ley lines are a fascinating concept. Traditional science would really discount them, but there is increasing amounts of evidence that something is going on. I mean, personally, I got involved with it down in Cornwall by complete accident. I was walking across the moors to some old stone circles, and there was a guy there who was teaching divining and ley lines. And I thought, that's for me. Walked over, I took the two sticks in my hand, and he said, just walk between the stone circles. And it wasn't a case of the stick swinging, they hit me in the chest. And you could walk and see the line, and he said there were lines of energy. And even when you go to the old stones, these are 3,000 to 4,000 years old, there were rings which you could detect around them. As an engineer, as a scientist, and even a partly physicist, I have no idea how that works, but there's something there. And these ley lines are meant to transcend and transect the country. They link ancient places and holy places, and Northwood House sits on one.
And sort of like, have you ever had anyone into the house?
In these once-used bedrooms, mediums have detected the presence of several children. The upstairs wing, or the servants' quarters, accommodated partygoers, nuns, a jury, a judge, and children with their governess. A girl calling herself Alice, discovered by experts, is known to travel the corridors. Every room in this part of the house seems to tell a tale. Indeed, not surprising, as this part of the property was also where servants during George Ward's tenure would live and sleep, so it's easy to imagine it as a hive of activity that has left behind several traces. Many is the time that objects have been cleared off the tables in these rooms and have simply vanished.
I did go up to the top corridor one time, I broke off from the tour. They were just renovating a corridor that we hadn't been allowed to go down before because of the way everything was, but they were turning it into offices. So I went down that corridor, took some photos, and yeah, there was someone at the end of the corridor. I suspect it could have been Henry because I could see a white frilly shirt.
Up in the attic is a good example. There's a corridor there we called Alice's corridor. A little girl there called Alice. She was left here when it was a boarding school, and she would always interact with us as well as our crowd sometimes. So one Halloween, I ripped up some bedsheet and hung them off the ceiling, like off the rafters, before the roof was redone. And we had an investigation that we did that Halloween, like directly after the walk. And the whole, it must have been about 20 people in there, watched this thin ribbon just twisting as if someone was twisting in their hand like this. But obviously you couldn't see the hand. So it's not just swaying, but it was actually twisting upwards as well. So that was a good one. You'd often, hear laughter, or you always felt happy up there. There's no, overbearing presence, which you can get in some other areas of the building. It was always felt quite bubbly up there, really.
We felt welcome.
Yeah. She used to like moving things as well. That was quite funny. Actually, the same Halloween, we got a wind-up doll that played Ring a Ring a Rosie. So when I went up there after being Henry in the cellar, I'd give it a few winds and it would play a couple of times. And then I'd do it again when the crowd come by. So they've got that, when you're in a dark corridor with bits of bed sheet which almost feel like spider webs going across your face, and you hear Ring a Ring a Rosie, that can be a little bit ominous, which was the effect we were going for, but she seemed to really like it. And that doll, every single day of Halloween, because we came and did it every single day for a week, would move, and the doll would be in a different place. So I was like, I've got to play a game with her now, I've got to go find it so I can make it play the song for her. So I think that was probably one of the best ones for actually having something move.
Children have even been spotted by the occasional dog walker or passerby climbing the trees and playing in the grounds. These apparitions are thought to be the souls of children who died during the height of the influenza outbreak and are seen either appearing as full people or balls of spirit energy, hanging in the air on a dark night, further adding to the stories and history this unique house entertains.
It's not just the house though, the grounds. The grounds are quite active. You get experiences. We used to do the walks in the grounds. Being there a lot longer than everybody else, you'd have to be in a particular place, waiting and waiting, and you could often feel the presence of somebody else there when you know there's no one there with you. And I saw a figure step out from the big oak tree out the front and look at me and then step back behind the tree, but it wasn't a person, it was a shadow. So it's a very interesting place, but there's so many different timelines that are here for obviously when it was very, very old, the original Bellevue house.
The 10th of December 1817 marked the date of the last fatal duel fought on the Isle of Wight, right here in Northwood House's park. John Sutton, a passenger on the cruise ship Grace and aspiring naval officer, was shot by a Major Lockyer of the 2nd Exmouth Company on his way to South America to fight for Spanish patriots in the war against Mexico. He challenged Mr. Sutton after an intense verbal argument over a billiards game, Sutton drunkenly insulting the Major's eyewitnesses confirmed. The morning of the duel, Sutton was seen to drop his pistol in apology. Unfortunately, the Major was still seen to shoot. Sutton, being hit in the chest, collapsed and later died of his wounds. The Major evaded capture for the police for several weeks before being captured in a pub in Portsmouth. However, Lockyer put forward a persuasive case and was only sentenced to 3 months in prison. Sutton was laid to rest in the nearby St Mary's churchyard, his name forever joining those who stalk the grounds of Northwood today. The library certainly lives up to the rest of this house's mysterious nature. Designed in 1820 by John Nash, and at one point in its time contained over 5,000 books, behind me a secret staircase was built specifically for George Ward to go up and down to his private office undisturbed. However, during the World Wars, this room took over a much more macabre role. During this house's role as a hospital during the Great War, this room was where a majority of the coffins were brought for those who had perished during the conflict and those who had perished within the walls of this house as well. Investigators in this room have picked up on the smell of lilies. Lilies were often placed upon the bodies of the dead before they were sent away for burying or repatriation. The room had a similar sad role in 1942 following a particularly violent air raid over Cowes. 27 casualties from the local village were brought here to be buried, a sad reminder of the town's tragic war past. Outside the library, this corridor appertains to a very recent discovery in November 2015. A surveillance camera caught sight of a flashing light strolling across the corridor and into the library. A sight never seen before or since that date. Perhaps it was one final visitor paying their respects to the fallen. Once where Ward family partygoers would retire to after a night of carelessness, now this group of officers was once considered for exorcism. Such were the disturbances in the area. Presences around this area include a partygoer, seen to be gazing down there, possibly excluded from the ballroom. The room itself, just round there, has been repeatedly trashed over several nights. Lots of staff have come in, opened the door, and found pens, papers, and stationery strewn about the floor.
There are reports also of a man in grey peering out of the window at those who stroll past the house. People have tried to guess who it may be, perhaps George Ward himself gazing out of the window over his wonderful party property. He has been the cause of many late-night calls to the house, reporting that people may be trapped inside the building.
But again, I'm not a fan. On the other hand, I love the science. I love the fact that motion sensors tripped on the Egypt corner and a shape passed by, and we recorded it on the video. And there was nothing there. I was the first person down. And we sat there for another 3 hours. I sat in front of a TV set watching it. And while I was sat there, a door to my left slammed and the motion sensors went. And I find it fascinating. And that's part of the interest is the whole of this subject people get wrapped up with kooks and all the weird elements. And it's not. Each one of those events is a specific event. And as an observer, I want to know why, because it shouldn't happen. You know, if it happens once, but that's the biggest issue with any paranormal is it's not repeatable. And science demands empirically that it can be repeated. If you mix A and B, they give you C, and you do it every time, and that's science. Here at Northwood House, something happens, and it may not happen again, or it happens twice in an evening, or it always happens out the corner of your eye, and when you turn around. And I guess that's part of the fun of it.
And so we've seen the house's denizens there for many periods of history, still walking the floors and peering from the cracks in time. But what we haven't found out is why here there is such a numerous amount of sightings and strange occurrences.
Experts have often attributed the Isle of Wight to be centred upon several ley lines or channels of energy that circle the planet. Where they intersect, there seems to be numerous sites built in response to an increase in energy. Sites include the pyramids, stone circles, and indeed burial mounds in this country as well.
It is thought that these sites of increased energy provide the power necessary for ghosts and other apparitions to take shape. Indeed, across the Isle, the numerous ghost stories from its beaches and old manor houses, prisons and inns seem to indicate it as a place of paranormal activity, giving it the nickname the Ghost Isle.
Thank you for dropping by.
And we at the house wish you well.